So just to start off with, I'm going to run through a quick PowerPoint. Just to give you a bit of background, I worked for Autodesk for 7 years, but I've been using 3D Studio since the DOS days from 18 years ago. So it's a long time using 3D software. But this latest release of 3ds Max is really powerful for me, especially. Not because it has so many big, exciting new features, but because it has many small features. And these small features are the things that really speed up my work, because after 18 years of using software, I don't really want to spend 100 hours every week on the software. I like to leave at 5 o'clock, and these improvements in the latest versions are helping me get out the door at 5 o'clock and live a life other than being a 3D guy. So this project has got many different parts. One thing is called XDR, one is Nitrous, and these are basically rewriting the whole 3ds Max software, or different parts of it. And over the last 5 years, we've seen many improvements, but as I mentioned, this year we see even more. So there is a lot of other areas that 3ds Max 2013 has focused on. One is being able to customize many parts of the user interface. And for me as well, this is a really important thing because, for example, one of the jobs I used to do at Autodesk was in the beginning of a production, when a studio would be setting up their pipeline, we would go in and advise what tools we thought was best for that job, and then how to use those tools. But one thing we didn't have the ability to do at that time was customize the user interface for each individual artist or each department within a company. And I'll show you later how important that can be. We've got this new system of moving characters between all the different softwares, and we've rewritten some of the animation tools in 3ds Max so that when we convert characters between different programs, we get one-to-one translation. There's some new dynamic system additions. The animation store is something which is quite interesting as well. And there's a lot of focus on rendering tools and also preparing things for render, and then integrating these renders with things like After Effects or Autodesk Composite. So basically all our tabbed layout tools, these are now completely configurable. I'll show you this in detail, as well as workspaces. Now this is the area I mentioned where I wish I had this tool before when setting up a pipeline within a company. Because, for example, an animator doesn't need to see the modeling tools, or a scripter doesn't need to see any of these tools at all. And we can now set up these workspaces and just customize Max to each individual user. Also, the Maya navigation tools have been introduced in 3ds Max. Now this is just a nice feature to help if you're moving between softwares, so you don't have to relearn keyboard shortcuts. In terms of performance, using the particle flow system, we've got a 10 times performance boost. So it's a really huge performance increase there. With animation, we've got a performance match with DirectX 9 shaders. There's a lot of improvements in working with sub-objects and also with our shading modes. Now, once we get into an example of this, you'll see that we can now use depth of field, image-based lighting, and some really nice additions to our real-time rendering. Now this is something which is quite interesting, is we have this portable characters, which is using the human IK, or the HIK system, which was the heart of Motion Builder for many years, to move all of this around. So that one of the limitations we've had in the past when moving data would be we'd always have to bake all the keyframes to the bone. So you'd have a keyframe for every frame of animation. Now with this we can only transfer just the important keyframes, and we've rewritten the Max track view or animation curves to be able to handle this. And the other nice thing is the characterization is automated. Now, if you've used Motion Builder in the past, you'll know that you have to tell Motion Builder with a map what each part of the body is. You have to set this up, and it would take maybe half an hour to do. And now this is instant, it's real time. So this is what I mentioned before. We've rewritten the animation controller, but we've also introduced a few other tools which were inside Maya before to do with animation retiming. And we've also got a new performance increasing tool called G-Poly. Now this G-Poly is part of new technology. At this stage the implementation is such that you need to add a modifier to turn the mesh to this G-Poly, and then you get the performance increase. In future versions of Max, we're anticipating that this will just be built into the mesh, and the meshes will just perform much faster. There's been some additions to the Mass Effects tools. This is the Dynamics tools, and these are around the areas of constraints. We've got new constraint support. There's a new cloth modifier, so that this is separate to our other cloth. So it's more for doing things like inflating balloons and all sorts of things. And there's a new ragdoll tool in there as well. So if you need to have a character be, he might be doing something and then he falls, all this falling motion can be automated by the dynamics. Now this is one thing that might be of interest to you. It's something that I've actually used myself. Even when I was in Autodesk, I was putting in ideas through here because hoping they'd listen. And this is quite a good address to remember, autodesk.uservoice.com. Now, this is basically people like yourself telling Autodesk what tools you need. And this can be a completely new tool, or it could just be that, I don't like the way this tool works because I have to click 20 times, and I think you could click once to achieve this same effect. Now, all of these features on the right here, and more, which we haven't gone into, are actually new features inside Max 2013, which people like yourself are responsible for. So it's a really, really nice thing to see, because all of these things really do save a lot of time. Animation Store is something which is quite cool. As I mentioned before, I like to leave work at 5 o'clock, go and have a beer or something, and Animation Store really helps me do this. For certain types of animation, you don't need to animate this stuff yourself. I'll show you later this in depth, what type of animations are there, but the fact that I can just go to somewhere, buy an animation for $10 and have that implemented in my scene instantly means that I'm not animating that for the next few hours or the next few days, and I might just charge my client $10 more for purchasing that. There's also this interoperability. We're talking about moving data between Max, Maya, Motion Builder, Mudbox, Softimage, AutoCAD, Revit. This is an internal effort to make all of the Autodesk products work better together, but this is also happening with other non-Autodesk products, because we know that not everybody uses everything Autodesk. You have to use other tools sometimes. There's no Photoshop made by Autodesk or After Effects or things like this, but we've made it so that if you're using After Effects, if you're using Photoshop, then it works much better together with 3ds Max. This is also happening on the industrial design side of things, so there's many other products like this Cartier or Pro Engineer, and there's a direct connection with these tools as well. Now I'll just quickly go over this, because if you're mostly games guys, you might not be doing too much rendering, but there's a new set of tools called state sets. It's not just for rendering, it's also for scene management, but it does tie into the render path system very well, and it's just a really powerful way of setting up your scene in many different versions. So, for example, you might be still working on the modeling of your scene, but you might have some textured objects in there as well, and what you can do is set up different sets or different states, so that, for example, you can switch to a modeling mode and just see everything without textures, without having to turn off textures or things like this. And you can even set visibility, so if you're just working on a group of objects, you can hide the rest of the scene and instantly change it to a different viewport rendering style. And when it comes to this rendering system, basically we're using a node-based editor. So if you're familiar with the new material editor called the Slate window, where we have all these nodes and you can connect them, this is also being used inside this state sets tool for setting up your render passes. Basically, once you set up all of these render passes, you can then set a compositor link. So this file can then be sent to After Effects or to Photoshop or to Autodesk Composite. And then this compositor will automatically prepare all the layers for you. So for example, if you've rendered out an image of a person, then you might have rendered the background separately. And then when it comes to the character itself, you might have rendered a highlight pass, a shadow pass, an ambient illusion pass, and whatever other passes. When you now pass this file into After Effects, it already comes in with the correct transfer modes. So for example, highlights would be an additive mode, shadows are in multiply mode, and you don't have to really think about this or set it up, it just comes in straight away. There's also been improvements to the interactive renderer, iRay. So this is based on NetArray, and in this version we've got full hardware support, and the option, if you have say for example a big workstation with 3 graphics cards in there, you can tell it to use certain graphics cards on this rendering. So you might maintain the low performing card just for running Windows, and then the other 2 cards for rendering in iRay, which is really cool. So when it comes to tools development, especially for games, this is really important. There's now a new SDK exposure for this Slate node-based editor. So basically, if you're designing a tool in your studio, you can now have that tool be implemented as a node-based tool. So it's much nicer for artists to work with. And then going further, there's .NET exposure of the SDK. So there's a wrapper for nearly all of 3ds Max SDK, and this is giving you the ability to use things like C#, Python, and many other things. So let's get away from this now, and I'll just quickly show you a video from last year's GDC. In the next presentation, which my colleague's going to show you, he's going to focus on middleware for games, and I'll let him show you the newest reel. But after this, we'll jump straight into 3ds Max. Well, for next year, your work could be there. You just have to let us know about it. So if you send your work to your local reseller or to your distributor, Boneheads, or directly to Autodesk, we're always wanting to put more and more work from places we don't have much from. So please, if you're doing really nice work, then let Autodesk know about it. Okay, so first thing I want to just quickly show you is some of this customization that I mentioned. Now, as a technical director, as I mentioned, I like to have a really clear working pipeline, and everybody in the team have specific tools just for them. So now, if you've been using Macs before, you'll know that one thing with just the viewport navigation is you've got this maximize, minimize button to work with different views. But on the side here now, we've added this toolbar which brings all of our standard viewport layouts. So this is one thing that's been happening with Mac's viewports, is we're trying to get all the tools into one place. Before, to set certain things with the viewport, you might have had to go to customize menu or views menu and set this was somewhere over here. And now we're getting all these tools close together. So again, this just means you're going to work faster and faster. And when it comes to standard viewport layouts, I like to customize these for different people. So for example, if I'm setting this up for the tools team, then I obviously want to see the realistic view in the viewport here, and I might set this to camera view. But in this window, I can set this, for example, instead of being like the wireframe view, I might set this to be like some node-based editor, or I might set this as, I'm not sure if you've seen all these tools in the past, but we can also make this stylized things like pencil shader or acrylic. But one thing I might want in this is the extended viewports. Now I can put things like the track view, the scene explorer, schematics, motion mixer. If you're working with motion capture, you can use the biped animation workbench. But I might just set this up as a Mac script listener, so I could start coming in here and writing some really good code. I'm actually not a coder. I'm not sure if you can tell by my coding skills, but undefined. I thought that was really defined. Anyway, so I could set this up as a scripting tool, or for a scripter, I could set it up for animation. But the nice thing is then I can come and actually save these. So I can save this out as a script preset and then share this with many people. So as the pipeline guy setting this up for my whole team, I'll just set everything up on my computer and then deploy it to everybody else in the team. So this is one part of this. The next part is having these different workspaces. So if I go to my default workspace, I can instantly here get rid of different parts of my UI. I'll just jump back to a full view here. So you can see now it's just the default one that's got all my modeling tools. But if I want to set this for, say, working with, working with, in this case, dynamics and particles, I've already set this one up previously. But of course, I could customize this and add, whatever tools I need. And then once I've set this up to be, whatever it needs to be, then I can simply go and save this out. And again, share it with the rest of my team. Now what's kind of neat is you can take this a lot further. You can tell it what different things you want to save and save this out to an external file. You can also then have a Mac script, so you can customize this even further. And you can see here that one thing you can do is even customize the ribbon. So this, at the moment, the modeling ribbon, and also the hotkeys. So I think this hotkeys is really important because, again, if you've got a Maya user who wants to come across to Macs to use some of the tools in Macs, he doesn't have to relearn his keyboard shortcuts or his hotkeys. We can just make sure that we set them up for him, and he can start using Macs with the same navigation tools and the same hotkeys. So if we really want to customize this even further, I won't bore you by showing you everything here, but this modeling toolbar, you can now custom design your own toolbar with this model, with this ribbon interface. So this is really useful because if you're, again, if I'm setting this up for an animator, I can hide the stack here, I can get rid of this, I can get rid of all these other tools and just build a fully custom Max UI just for that animator or just for whoever. So all of these different bits we can add, but building it in front of you would be a little bit boring, so I won't do that now. So now, one thing I want to do is, in this case, I might want to use Motion Builder to take advantage of some of the really powerful motion capture retargeting tools we have there. In the past, we could do this with regular bone characters. For a few years, we could do it with a Character Studio biped. But for the last few years, we've also had the CAT, the Character Animation Toolkit. And this CAT system is quite neat because it's a pretty cool system. If we add a cat motion layer here, we can get some animation happening pretty quickly. He looks pretty strange. I'm not sure who really walks like this. But the nice thing about this is you can come in to customize every single part of the cat system. Come back. Okay, so basically with the globals here, you can see that I've got things like how quickly he's going to walk. So I can make him walk very fast or much slower. And then really there's so many controls here for the pelvis. You can control how the hips are moving on every axis, how much they're pushing forwards and backwards, or how much they're shifting to the sides. You can start putting in something that's more to the right. So you might have a character which has a problem with his leg and he's always going to be walking funny on the right side. And then you can really set this for the legs, for the head, and for many parts of the body. So this is a great way sometimes to get some unique movement into a character. And it's a very fast way of working. But if you're working with motion capture, then you can bring the motion capture directly into the CAT system. But and even though there are tools to work with it, there's much more powerful tools inside Motion Builder. And my philosophy with working with 3D animation is never to be stuck on the one tool, because if there's a way to do something faster in another tool, then move it across to another tool. Now, in the past, a lot of the big studios were quite happy to have Max, Softimage, Maya, Motion Builder, and all these tools in one production. Now, I'm mostly a 3D Max guy, but during my time at Autodesk, I was asked to come to New Zealand to go to Lord of the Rings and Avatar and all these things, because they were actually, some of them were using 3ds Max and some weren't, but they wanted to see if they could solve the problems they were having in other software with these tools. And in the case of Lord of the Rings, they ended up getting another 20 3ds Max artists in there. And with Lord of the Rings as well, they were even using AutoCAD and full architectural tools. And they're really, really open to this. And normally, I find it's smaller studios or individuals who don't really want to mix the pipeline too much and have all these different tools. But my advice these days is to mix it as much as possible, because we've got this one-click system between all the tools now. In the past, for me, exporting to Motion Builder was a slow process. You'd have an export window with many different options, and when you came into Motion Builder, you'd spend a lot of time setting this up. Now, as you can see, I've sent it across from 3ds Max. I come into my character controls here, tell it to use a control rig, and that this control rig can be inverse kinematics only, or even better is using a full FK, IK switchable rig. So now that's the entire setup time, and I've got my character ready to animate. So one of the things that's quite cool inside of Motion Builder is how the animation tools work. So you can see here, this is basic IK, which we have in every animation tool where you can get him and say hello. It's all normal. But what's really unique about Motion Builder is you can switch this to full body IK, so that if he needs to pick something up off the ground, then you're halfway there. You've already animating the legs, animating the hips, just from one motion. So this is obviously a much more flexible system than standard inverse kinematics, and it allows you to be a lot more creative and a lot faster. But as I mentioned, one of the nice things about Motion Builder is how you can retarget animation from one character to another. So here I'm just adding in another character. We can see this little run motion, and I can simply now, instead of saying using this control rig, I can switch it over to this same motion, so our character is instantly running. Now sometimes you get some different problems when the motion interprets. You can see here his shoulders have come down a bit funny. So we can quickly fix that up by going to our character and working on the different components there. So if we just bring this up a little bit. Basically, in here we can see every different part of the body and how we can adjust all of those things. So basically in this section here we've got something called reach. So if I look at the left hand, for example, or the left arm, I can say that I want the translation of this to match or to reach towards the original setup I had. So I set that for the left arm, and I'll set it for the right as well, and now we've got that sort of problem that was in the shoulder disappeared. So that's nice and easy to quickly change. Now if we also want to go a little bit further, we've got these things called offsets. So we can change the way that this motion is interpreted for our different characters. So if I look at something like the hips offset, I've got the hips level here. Now if I just bring that down, you can see he's going to fall through the floor. So what I might want to do there is go into our floor contacts, and basically this recognizes where the ground is in our scene, and we can make this ground actually an object as well, so that this feet, if we make it an object that's a surface like this, as it's walking, it can always recognize where that floor is. We don't have to go in and place the floor. So now if I change that hips level, you can see that his feet are sticking on the floor as well. Now he's looking very uncomfortable. Okay, so anyway, it's very quick and easy to change all of these things. We can do all sorts of things. If you've got for example, a dinosaur or a dog or something which has the knee backwards, then you can flip all this motion as well. So it will walk, in this sort of funny way, and that's, again, just really easy to set up. So now if we want to send this back to 3ds Max, it's as simple as just clicking on Update. We don't have to, go to the menu here and say Send to and blah, blah, blah. It recognizes that there's a live connection with 3ds Max, and we can see that there. So this is the same if you were using Mudbox or Softimage or Maya. We'll keep this live connection. So you could actually have two artists working on this at the same time. And that might be the way to do it in your studio if you don't know Motion Builder. You can send it to the Motion Builder guy, he's working on it, and he'll tell you, cool, I'm sending it back, and then I get that animation back in my scene. So now I've got that motion. As you can see, it's been interpreted onto my character. I haven't had to really worry about interpreting this back onto a cat rig, and you can see I've still got all my cat tools available to me. So one thing I can do now, once I've got it back in 3ds Max, is I might make an adjustment layer. So if I go and grab, say, the arm or the hand of my character, Then I can turn on my auto key, for example, and make some adjustment to it. So he's going to be running like this now, and I can start, putting layers of animation over the top of all these things that I've already done. So, if we want to give him some really unique motion, we can make him look very strange. And as I showed you before, I'm not really good at scripting and maybe not so good at animation. No. So that's just a quick look at how we're working together with all these different tools, how we can customize the user interface to work a lot faster. And I'll just quickly jump in and show you how we can get to our final render much quicker by using viewport rendering. Now, just to tell a little story while this file's loading, back in the old days of 3D animation, in the very first 3D tools I used, anytime you moved an object, it would turn into a wireframe box. For a start, we didn't have a shaded view. It would always look like this. But if you moved something, it became a box. So this was really crazy. You rotate something, it's a box, and then it would redraw to the car, and you're like, oh, I rotated too far. Rotate back. So in this 18 years, we not only can see an object as it's rotating, amazing, we can now basically render in real time with quite high-level effects in the scene. One other little thing that some Maya users that started using 3ds Max asked for, and this is one of these little user voice features, was a gradient in the background. You can see this going from dark to light. But if you're a Maya user, you'll probably know that it goes from light to dark, so we got that backwards. So anyway, if we're adding in, again, things like I mentioned before, changing the views here, if we want to adjust this gradient to go from light to dark, or to be solid color, or to use an environment background, we've got this menu directly in the viewport. Before you'd have to go here and search through and find it. It's here now, so we can go viewport backgrounds, and I'm going to say let's use the one we're using for rendering, or for our environment. Now if we have a look at what's going on in the scene here, this map here is a HDR image. I'm sure you're all familiar with HDR, or high dynamic range images. But using a high dynamic range means that we can understand the lighting of the original scene, because the image is constructed from photographs of different exposure levels. So it tells us that here is really the source of the light in the scene, and over here will just be reflected light. There's no direct light source. So if we come in and have a look at our car here, we can see that we're using this for a reflection at the moment. But new feature here is if we switch into our realistic view, then we can get this actually using the that map to light the scene. Now you can see straight away that there was only a little difference in this, like the rendering here is now aliased, anti-aliased, and looking quite nice, but we need to configure this a little bit further. So in our lighting and shadows tool, we can say let's not use the default lights, let's use the scene light, and this automatically recognizes that we have this high dynamic range image. We want to see the highlights on our model. We can use the skylight as an ambient color. We want to see shadows, we want to see ambient occlusion, and we want to see reflections from our environment. On my machine, this is a little bit slow, but obviously if you're on a workstation, you can have this lighting and shadows quality up to maximum. Same with ambient occlusion and different elements. So now when I apply that, you'll see that even on this Mac, it's going to do something strange. Actually, I think I know what I did. Turn off that one. Let's see, fingers crossed. Yes, okay. So now you can see that this is rendering with the ambient occlusion. You're getting those nice sort of shadows and the detail there. We're getting the lighting, obviously, from the scene. And you can see that to maintain this real-time performance in the view, so you can move and navigate, it drops down the shading to what your graphics card can handle in real time. And then once it's, you've stopped moving this, then it does the rendering. So this relates to my story before of when it used to turn into a box. Now it turns into just something quite good, but not quite as good as that. So if I want to take this again to the next further, I'm just going to create a camera here. Handy little shortcut if you don't know, Control-C makes a camera from your current view. And now once we're in that camera, we can set up things like the depth of field. So if I turn this on and switch it to mental ray depth of field, then we'll see that we get some kind of very blurry result in the beginning. So I'm just going to get a little bit better camera angle on this one. Get some nice perspective in there. Oops, I want you. Okay, so finally, now we've got this set. What I want to do is turn on the depth of field, but make it work a bit better. So my target distance here needs to be. Actually, let me just quickly jump into a top view here and set this up a bit better. Sorry. So basically, just to let you know, as you can see, the skylight is the only light in that scene that we've got. And I just want the target of this one. Okay. So I want my target basically where I want the focus point to be. So I want the focus of my depth of field to be at that point there. Just bring it down. And now we can see, once that starts rendering, basically where that target of your camera is, that's the area where the focus will be. And then the back of the car here is obviously out of focus. Now, if you wanted the background here to be out of focus as well, then you just need to put that HDR map onto a skier. I'm just using it as an environment map, so it won't blur it. But just like a normal camera, you have f-stop controls or aperture controls. So if you have a very low aperture, then you'll get much more blur. As you can see, that this is becoming very, very blurry at the back there. So it's a very fast lens. If you have a much higher value, like 2 for example, then you'll see that you just get a very subtle blur on there, which helps just direct the eye to the parts of the image that you want people to focus on. This same sort of real-world camera terminology has also been extended into the environment tools. And oh, there it is. I was wondering why my shortcut wasn't working. It's just hiding. So basically, in exposure controls, we have this mental ray photographic exposure, and we can switch this here to just be a basic exposure value. Or if you are into photography, you can use things like the shutter speed, aperture, and also the film speed, or the ISO. Great thing with the 3ds Max ISO is if you put it up at a value of 12,800, it's not going to introduce noise into the picture like it would with a camera. So you can crank that and no problem. So let's jump on, have a look at some other features. Might just quickly show you some of the little things as well, because these might be little things that you've found problematic in 3ds Max before. Now if I jump into my model here, you can see that I've got this set to be, when I select an object, to see the wireframe. But if I switch to this mode, it's not set like this as well. So just, again, this is a little thing which is quite nice, because maybe in your wide view you don't want to see that. In your close-up view, when you're modifying objects, you do. One little thing that's a big addition is, or a big thing for me, was selecting edges. Now if you wanted to select an edge loop or something in previous versions of Max, this was the way you do it. Now you can just double click, and that's a big time saver for me. And if you're not a regular Max user, you're probably like, why are you showing me this? Anyway. Another thing that's pretty useful is, or was pretty useful, is the array tool. Now, in the past, this array tool was quite frustrating because you'd say, okay, I want 10 copies of this object and I want it on this axis, and you couldn't see where it was going. A few years ago, we added this preview option so you could see where it was going. But the problem was then you could see it, but what if you needed to see over here and you couldn't? So now all of the dialogues like this in Max are modeless, which means that you can still access the viewport while you have a tool like this. So again, woo! Little thing, but big thing for super geeks like me. Okay, so another little thing which I find again very, very useful is working with this same modeless tools. So say, for example, if you're drawing a spline in the scene and you want to draw this line over here, and maybe the goal is you want these little objects to be sort of going around this feature here in the scene. So what we could do is start drawing this to go around, but then, oops, we've gone too far. Previous versions of Max, you'd have to cancel your line and come back, but now we can just simply move the viewport while that creation mode's active, and even switch viewports completely. So this is, again, really nice little thing to keep working fast. Now this has also been added to the editing tools themselves. So if we come into the edit poly, and I want to add some details in here, then if I was using the cut tool, I'll just turn on my edge faces here. If I was using the cut tool, then this also had the same problem that when I got to here, I'd have to cancel my cut and navigate and then come back in and start cutting again. But this has been changed, obviously, so that we can do all of this without having to stop the creation. So this is, again, just these little things which at the end of the day save a large amount of time, because if you only have to click once instead of 20 times, you've saved, you're working 20 times faster. Now just quickly to show you the animation, some of the changes to the animation tools. Say for example we've got this character here, and he's doing this this sort of big roar or whatever. Maybe we need him to do this action, or the director of the project says, okay, we want him to scream like this, but we want him to scream until he comes back down to the ground. And you say, oh, but you told me I only had to animate it at the beginning. No, I changed my mind. This is what directors do. So what we need to be prepared for is these changes. So helping us with this is the new animation tools. So if I come in here and I realize, okay, that animation is finishing at around frame 30. I need that to continue to, say, frame 50. Then I'll just grab my the bones for my head, come into my curve editor, and thankfully they're already selected, one or the other, handy new features a few years ago. Just one other thing, in case you had some of these problems in Max before of moving the window and sometimes the screen was flashing, this has all been fixed. The reason for this was they were rewriting how the viewports render, and now you can see that we've got this way of moving things to keep it looking right. Now this retiming tool is very, very easy to use. I just say double click to create something there, then around about here at frame 30, I create another frame, and now to simply change the timing of this animation. So we'll come here where we can see, sorry, he's already got his mouth closed. These two little bits I added now has created a frame range, and now everything that is selected within that range I can stretch to make faster or slower. So if I just grab that one there, start pulling it out, oops, just moving time. Start moving this out, we can see that it's just stretching those frames in that range there and then just pushing everything else further along. So now I'll set that to be about frame 50, and if we come back, we can see that we've got the bear screaming or roaring for 50 frames instead of 30. So it's really very fast, very easy to change all the animation timing of these things now. And basically we can also come in here and bake those keyframes or create new keyframes as well. So I'll just bake them. And as I mentioned before, one of the ways we're looking to speed up how deforming meshes render is with this tool called Turn to Gpoly. So basically by putting that on top of your animation stack, the mesh will calculate much faster. Another just very small thing, there's been a few additions to the skinning tool so that you can sort this list much better. So if you type in a wildcard like an asterisk symbol and just a head, then it allows me just to find those head bones and work with them. And there's also a new sorting tool for that as well. So just a little thing, but again, these are all features that people asked for through this user voice website. Okay, now looking at the animation tools, here's my really cool little guy. In the utilities section of Max, in the very top, you can see we have this animation store, and because I'm connected to the internet, you can see that that just stopped being black, and I can actually go to this option here and buy a character. You know, if I'm doing some, for example, some architectural job or something where the characters are not so important, instead of modeling them, I'd go straight there, buy them, throw them in the scene, render, be finished, leave home and leave work at 4 o'clock and not even 5. Or if I've got a character like this guy and I want to animate him quickly, then I can come into the shop here and browse through all the different motions. So we've got things like general motions, so these would be actions or gestures, things like this. Running, jumping, reacting, standing, taunting, which is teasing, throwing, there's all sorts of things here. And then there's more relevant things to, say, gaming, like combat, like fighting, adventures, dancing, sports, everyday business, maybe people shaking hands. And so, for example, if I come into the dance section here, I can highlight all of these or deselect different things and then say search. So that'll go through and give me new search results here, and I can see what all of these do. Now before I actually buy these, I can preview them on the character, so I can see my character moving with these motions without having to purchase them. But somewhere in here there's also some free ones, so I'm going to try and find that. Oh, where's the free? Maybe it's here somewhere. Alright. Come on. I don't have a credit card with me, I can't buy any. Okay, here's one. Here's a free one. Please select the character to preview this one. So if you select the root of your character, click on this motion, then you'll get some extra controls here down at the bottom, and you can say preview in scene. So any of these you could be previewing. It's now just downloading that animation, getting my character going. So I can see that straight away. But the nice thing about this is I can customize this quite well as well. So there's this option here for energy. It could be very low energy, which if you went to the party last night, this is how I was feeling this morning. But last night at the party, it was high energy, we're dancing. There's options to make it slower or faster. There's options of how the arm space is working. So if it's a very fat character, you might have to dance like this. If it's skinny, you can be like this. And the cool thing is, once you're happy with that, you can say, let's buy that. In this case, it's free, so I can continue without logging on. And shopping carts, you know what these look like. Checkout, $0. Here's my $0 Autodesk. And you can see I've bought a few of those before. Now when you use this, you can download it as an FBX file, so that then you could switch this around to different animation programs. You can write the keys to the scene or add them to the end of the scene. So I'm just going to write them into the scene, and then I've got them there as keyframes which I can adjust. And let me just stop that playback. And we can see this is quite a long animation as well. It's about 25 seconds long. So that's pretty cool. And obviously once I've got that there, you can see here that this has actually come from motion capture files, so I've got a keyframe per frame. But in Max we also have our animation layers tool as well. So using animation layers, you could then enable that for IK, for position, rotation, whatever you need, and then start adding your own layers on there so that you can control them to do exactly what you want. And I think I've pretty much run out of time. Have I run out completely? Alright. One big change, as I mentioned before, was the dynamic system. Now, this is some stuff maybe you can watch on the internet. But one last thing I want to just quickly show you guys is a tool which I only became familiar with about 6 months ago from Autodesk. It's free for basic stuff. It's called 123D, and it has several different versions. 123D Catch is something that I find really, really useful. Now, you can use this on your iPhone, your iPad, online, and basically what it allows you to do is build 3D models from photographs. Now, this is just a gallery of some that people have created before. And here you can see, for example, this one. These are the photographs that the person used. So basically you just need to go around, photograph this from all different angles, get above it, get underneath it. Usually 20 or 30 photos, does a really nice job. And then you can switch into 3D view. So this has built this model just from photographs. And this for me signifies a really big change in the 3D world, because it means that non-professionals can start building 3D content. And there's also kind of competition for you guys. So it's good to be aware that this stuff's happening and use it. And with inside 3ds Max, we've got some really cool tools for basically building, well, not really building new models, but creating new things. So for example, say if I've got, just say a very basic object here, like a sphere, and convert this to an e-poly. In our modeling tools, we've got a whole set of tools called conform. Now these conform tools allow you to basically construct a new mesh over the top of an old mesh. Now the reason you'd want to use this in combination with this tool is this mesh, if you did it of a person or a character, it's not going to be ready for animation. You have to remodel that tool so you get nice edge loops around the eyes and around the mouth, and the mesh is working for you in different ways for skinning. But what you can do now is you can use this 123D Catch, build your models, bring it back into 3ds Max and finish the model, and then transfer the textures even from this as well. So it's a really powerful thing. Now the basic version of this, as I mentioned, is free, but there is a way you can use a more professional version which has much higher resolution meshes, and that's something that you'd need to pay for. But the basic version is like this. And in the last year I've been working a lot more with augmented reality, and this is something that Autodesk is focused on more and more, and this is also part of that idea. And typically with games you're working with virtual reality, where you're creating fully 3D environments, but the first generation of augmented reality games have been coming out, and I've got a few of them on my iPhone, where you can be playing this game in the room, and it's using the people in the room, and you can be shooting this guy, or this girl here, or whatever the idea is. And this is actually a really interesting thing. Now, another tool I've been using, which is not an Autodesk tool, but I find really interesting, is this one called Buildar. So buildar.com. And the important thing for me here is this: no development is required, because I'm not a developer, and I don't have time to really, catch up on the last 10 years of augmented reality development. This tool allows you to take all the work you're doing inside 3ds Max or Maya or any Autodesk tool or this 123D Catch and bring it into an augmented reality environment and publish it to an iPhone or publish it to a smartphone without having to be a developer. So that's what I'm using for that, and it's really cool, and it's actually really cheap as well. It's like $9 a month for a subscription. Last thing with the Autodesk 123D is this fabricate tool. So once you've done a 3D model, you can now send it to Autodesk, and they'll send it back to you as a physical object. Now, this is something I wanted for years, because sometimes you make a really cool model or something, and it only exists on a screen, not as a real thing. So now you can get this 3D printed like this, or even this sort of very basic laser cut, kind of cool looking one there. So that's about it for me. Mike's going to jump into a presentation on games middleware, which is an area which Autodesk is doing a lot of development on, and it's looking really, really cool. But after these presentations, if you want to talk with myself or with Mike, then we'll be just out the front. So thank you very much for your time.